Hello, everybody. I greatly appreciated Sam's opening report and the other speakers and greeters. I was glad that Sam brought out the 4th of July and its significance for us and the working class movement. I want to add another historical note. 100 years ago, this very week, July 1905, Big Bill Haywood opened the founding convention of the International Workers of the World, the IWW, right here in Chicago. The story goes that Haywood stood up to open the convention and was overcome when he saw the sea of worker delegates. He stood looking out over the crowd for a few minutes, trying to decide how to begin. Finally, he grabbed a piece of wood, pounded it on the podium, and voice brimming with emotion, he declared, "Fellow workers, this is the Continental Congress of the working class. We are here to confederate the workers of this country into a working class movement that shall have for its purpose the emancipation of the working class from the slave bondage of capitalism. The aims and objects of this, The aims and objects of this organization should be to put the working class in possession of economic power, the means of life, in control of the machinery of production and distribution without regard to our capitalist masters." Well, looking out over this convention, feeling the energy and the passion, seeing all of your beautiful and diverse faces, I think I know how Big Bill Haywood felt. He felt great. 15 years later, Haywood joined the Communist Party and became one of our great leaders. Haywood spent those 15 years in the trenches of the class struggle. Free speech fights, picket lines, marches and demonstrations. He served time for his efforts to stop World War I. But he also learned from those struggles. He came to realize the limitations of syndicalism and of militancy alone. He came to realize that the class struggle was much more than an economic struggle, but a many-sided political and social struggle as well. Haywood came to see the need for the Communist Party. He also came to see the need to change his thinking and to renovate his ideology, not just because of the limitations of his old thinking, but because the world had changed greatly in those 15 years. The Soviet Union had been born, and the working class of the world now had an outpost of power, weak and struggling, no doubt, but still a counterpoint to world capitalism and imperialism. One of the greatest labor leaders in the history of our country, Haywood was always willing to embrace new tactics and new strategies in the face of change and new conditions. Yet he never gave up his core principles, and he kept his eyes on the prize of working class emancipation, full equality, peace, justice, and socialism. And that's what I like about the keynote, the draft program, and the political resolution. Grounded in the basic principles of our Marxist-Leninist working class science, with eyes focused on the prize, they struggle creatively and boldly to deal with the new conditions of the class struggle. Sure, there's plenty of room for strengthening, beefing up, and polishing, but that's what this convention is all about. The essence of these documents and the report is to chart a correct course in the face of some profound changes in the world and some very new conditions for our working class and people. I want to deal with change and new conditions and their impact on labor, and to underline what I believe to be the correctness of our general direction as it relates to labor. To put it mildly, it's a whole new ballgame for labor in the U.S. and in the world. Capitalist globalization, the incredible new growth of transnational capital, with its attending growth of the extreme right worldwide, and the wondrous development of new technologies creates a very new terrain of struggle for labor the world over. Much is made of the decline of union membership as a percentage of the workforce in this country. What really bothers me is that too many in labor, on the left, and even some in our own party, turn this into a subjective inner issue. What's wrong with this or that labor leader? Why don't the unions just fill in the blank? Why don't Or if the unions only would fill in the blank with your favorite scheme, and that would solve the problem if only labor would. But comrades, it takes two to do the class struggle tango. I used to say that the attacks on labor are the worst since the McCarthy period, or the wage-cutting attacks of the 1920s. And then I realized this 25-year assault on organized labor that Reagan began with PATCO is like no other in our history. The economic power of the transnational corporations, the political control of the extreme right, and the hyper-monopolization of the media, of information, and of culture, you know what? It's one hell of a testimony to the power and the glory of our multiracial, multinational, male-female, GLBTGQ straight, young, old, working class that we even still have an organized labor movement to complain about. The attack on labor is global. Around the world, labor movements, even very advanced, even left-led labor movements. Oh boy, I thought I had extended time. I have 8 minutes. All right. Little dispute about time up here. Around the world, the other side has the upper hand, the military might and the political power. That's where the real problem is facing organized labor. It's not social democrats or class collaborationists or insufficient militancy or lack of will that is eroding labor's power. It's transnational capitalism. Now back to Big Bill Haywood. The genius of his generation of labor militants was that they figured out that industrial unionism was the only way the working class could effectively resist the qualitative changes taking place in capitalism. That is, the development of mass production industries based on huge accumulations of capital. I believe that some of the qualitative changes in production and in the structure of global capitalism is happening today, similar. Of course, we don't have the time for me to develop that idea now, but I do want to make this point. Craft unionism was once the most advanced form of trade unionism. But as capitalism developed and as the imperialist stage of capitalism came on the scene, craft unionism was just not big enough or broad enough or democratic enough to be effective for the working class. And comrades, capitalism at that stage also produced fascism. And old class against class communist and socialist strategies just didn't fit the bill for defeating that most extreme political manifestation of capitalism. Instead, it took a major shift towards a united front that was broader, bigger, and more democratic to save the working class and people of the world. I think you get my drift and see where I'm going with this. Now, for some good news about the debates in labor. These debates are not about any individual labor leader or any particular restructuring plan. These debates are not driven by egos and personalities, though they often end up sounding like that. These debates are driven by capitalist globalization and the assault on labor and by the ultra-right. These debates will not end with the AFL-CIO convention at the end of this month. No matter what happens, and that's real good news. The debates are driven by a labor movement in the throes of change and development. It is astounding